Hi, everybody, and welcome back to The Science of B2B. I'm Kerry Cunningham. I head up research and thought leadership at Sixth Sense, and I'm a former Sirius Decisions and Forrester analyst. So we've been talking for a while now on prior episodes about the reality of B2B buying. And we've talked about the fact that buyers don't want to interact with you if you're a seller until 70% of the way through their journey. At that point, the reason they're ready to talk to you is because they've already made a decision, and that's true 84% of the time. And they're just not going to talk to you until that point. They've made that very clear that it doesn't matter if you're calling or emailing, they're just not going to talk to you until about 70% of the way through the journey when they've had a chance to make that short list and decide what they want. So we have to have another way of identifying buying processes. If you're waiting for people to fill out a form and say, contact me, that's too late to influence the buying journey. Even though I've just said that you're not going to get a chance to talk to them, that doesn't mean that you can't be influencing that journey. But to do that, you're going to need to know which accounts are actually in market and which are not. That requires intent data. And I'm going to lump into the category of intent data, as I did back at Forrester. You can see the buying signal framework that I wrote up back there. It's still on the Forrester website. But in the buying signal framework there, we put together intent data, third-party intent data, and the anonymous traffic on your website. Those are two sets of signals that tell you which accounts are in market for your solutions. But here's the thing, they're terrible signals by themselves. I've told you that your leads are terrible signals. 1 out of 100 of them turns into business. Well, anonymous traffic on your website, if you follow up on all of that, that's going to be even worse by itself. And if you follow up on intent data, if you take a surge, a company is showing some interest on a particular topic and you send your sales reps in there, that's going to be an even worse waste of time. So why do I think it's important and why is it good? Because you got to use it a little differently than you're using it today. You have to use it all together. And so in this episode, we have a theme, and that theme is triangulation. It's using signals from a bunch of different sources that all point to the same thing to create one much stronger signal than you would have had otherwise. So intent data, anonymous traffic, leads, all very bad signals by themselves. But when you put them together and when you see that they're pointing at the same set of accounts, now you've got a really strong signal. And that's what it's for. So all the folks out on LinkedIn complaining third-party intent is terrible, anonymous traffic is terrible. Yeah, they're terrible by themselves because you're doing it wrong, right? So how to do it right? Well, one example I think everybody is probably familiar with in B2B is the Myers-Briggs personality inventory, I think it's called. Myers-Briggs is a personality test that's used a lot in business, and it gives you a rating of your personality or a characterization of your personality on 4 dimensions. And the dimensions have 2 endpoints, and so you're measured as closer to one endpoint or the other on these 4 dimensions. Now, before we go any further, my background is in organizational psychology. There are lots of really good, valid measures of personality and how your personality relates to your work and those kinds of things. Myers-Briggs is not one of them. It is not a valid personality test. It doesn't repeat very well. It doesn't predict very much, but you're familiar with it, so we're going to talk about it. Myers-Briggs, 4 dimensions, right? 4 different dimensions. But when you take the Myers-Briggs test, it doesn't ask you 4 questions. It doesn't ask you 1 question for each dimension. That would yield a very, very bad scale. That would yield something that would vary all over the place. But they ask you, I think, 76 questions or something like that. And each of those questions contributes to one of the 4 dimensions. How you answer 8 or 10 questions on this dimension and another 10 on this dimension, 20 on this dimension, whatever that number is, those questions taken together point to a much stronger indicator of your personality than any one of the questions by themselves. It's the exact same principle. Every psychological test you've ever taken works exactly the same way. There are many questions that point at a characteristic that we're trying to measure. It's the exact same way in B2B with buying signals. So your leads are a form of buying signals. So is the anonymous traffic on your website. So are all of the third-party intent signals that you can get. So are syndicated content leads that you can get. So is the account level information from product review sites. So are the names that you get from product review sites. They're all signals, none of which are very good by themselves. But when you bring those signals together, and you create one big signal that combines them and says, if I see the same thing happen in 3 different places, that really means something. But if I see that happening in just one place but not in these other two, that's not as good a signal. It just makes sense. So we're going to dive into much more about intent data, how to think about it and how to use it. But for now, let's just understand that where we've got intent and we've got anonymous traffic and we've got leads, what we really need to do to have any success with them at all is bring them together. And then we'll talk more about when we use intent for marketing to drive actions and when we use intent for sales to drive actions and those kinds of things. So we've got that coming up on our next episodes in the intent series. But for now, thanks for joining us and we'll see you next time.